Welcome back. It's been a while. As you can see on the bench here today is an SX-64. Now I picked this up probably a couple years ago. I don't remember exactly. It's been turned on exactly once, and I don't really remember what it was doing at the time. I'm pretty sure that the keyboard was non-responsive, so we're going to have to fix that. And then we'll see what else needs to be done with it. Now, my intention here is this is going to be the first in a series of videos with this machine. It's going to get cleaned up. I'm going to fix whatever needs to be fixed on it, and going to do some mods to it along the way. It is not my intention to try to restore this thing to exactly the condition it was in when it came out of the box. All right, what I'm trying to do is to build something that I can use on a daily basis and just kind of keep sitting in the office, so when I want to whip it out and play some games or do some word processing on it, I can pull it out and do that fairly quickly and easily. So to that end, I'm going to do some mods on this thing as we go. One of the big changes is going to be I'm going to pull the screen out and replace that with an LCD. Now, I can hear some of you screaming already. But the screen is just so heavy, and I'm always afraid I'm going to sit this thing down too hard and break the screen or something. And so I think I really just want to pull that out, replace it with an LCD. And you know, I'll keep the screen. It'll sit here in my workshop area here, and I'm not going to do anything to this machine that's irreversible. So if at some point, you know, a wave of purity overcomes me and I decide I want to put the LCD screen back, I can do that. Or the, I'm sorry, if I can put back the old CRT, I can do that. Another thing that's going to get changed is I think I'm going to do a dual SID mod to this. Not because I'm particularly, you know, keen on having stereo sound out of this thing. It doesn't really make much difference to me personally one way or the other. But because at least one of the boards that I was looking at for that will make it very easy to add a headphone jack. So stereo through the headphones, well, that would be nice. So I think I'm probably going to do that as well. In terms of mods, there's a couple other things that I'm thinking about that I might do, but I'm not sure, so I'm not going to say anything yet. A lot of the rest of the work on this is going to be just getting it running the way it's supposed to, installing some heat sinks. I'm going to take a look at the user port. Some of these early models had a fault on the user port, and so we're going to correct that. And just, you know, anything else that looks like it needs to be fixed. Obviously that handle laying on top is a big thing that needs to be fixed. I have the pieces for one side but not the other, and if you take a look, you can see that there's some damage to the clips on the keyboard. And so what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to fire up the 3D printer, and we're going to 3D print some replacement parts. And I'd also like your feedback. So if there's anything that you think I should add to this thing, any mods that you think I should make that are useful and practical mods, by all means, let me know. Leave them in the comments below, and I'll take a look at it, because I'm sure that, you know, maybe you guys have some ideas that I haven't thought of yet. And I'd love to hear your suggestions. All right, let's get started. Put this off to the side. You can see here the keyboard doesn't even sit on here right because the clips are damaged. You can see here where the clip is completely busted off, so we're going to have to fix that. On the keyboard itself, if you look, you can see this is not sitting on there quite right either. It wants to go in at an angle, whereas this one's much happier going straight up and in. So we'll have to see what's going on with this one. But other than that, the keyboard looks to be in pretty good shape, apart from being dirty. See, there's not really any damage to it apart from those clips. So, but we're going to have to take this thing apart, I think, because if I remember correctly, this wasn't registering really any key presses when I tried it the first time. So I do have a replacement membrane that I'll be putting in there. That'll be part of this series as well. Okay, now the first step in disassembling this thing is to take these side pieces off. And that's really pretty simple. There's just 2 screws right here. You take those out, this side piece will slide out, and then there'll be more screws under there that hold the top part and the bottom part onto the main frame of the computer. So I'm going to take those out. Probably have some fast forwarding in our future. Now these side pieces just slide right out. Just try to be careful and don't break them. And now you see we've got screws, 3 screws holding on the top and the bottom on both sides. Now there's not really a good reason to take the bottom off, but we definitely do need to take the top off, so that's all I'm taking off right now. Okay, so now you can see we've got 3 screws holding the top part of the case on and 3 holding the bottom on each side. There's really not a good reason to take the bottom off generally. So I'm just going to take these top 3 off on both sides, and then the top part of the case will lift right off. Forgot one thing. There are also screws here in the corners holding the top and bottom on. So we need to take these 2 out and then the top will come off. Okay, now I told you earlier that I have only turned this thing on once since I had it, and I've never taken the top off. So your guess is as good as mine as to what we're going to find in here. I'm going to move the camera and then we'll take the top off. Okay, this thing is so big I can't actually get the camera on my mount in a way where it's going to show the entire thing. So I'm just going to try to go handheld for a minute and do this with one hand. So okay. Quick glance. Looks okay. I don't see anything at a quick glance that looks to be a major problem. Okay, well, let's take a quick tour. I'll show you what's in here. Obviously, this is the big CRT screen that is way heavy. Speaker looks to be okay. This is the board that controls all that. Power board back here. This is your I/O board, your input-output board. And you will notice, you can see all the pins here. This thing is barely even in there. Now, this is one of the problems that the SX-64 is known for, is over time this board wiggles its way out of that connector and then the computer stops working. So I'm going to take all these boards out and clean them and give them a close look and put some heat sinks on some of these chips. So I'm not going to bother trying to push it back in there right now, but that's definitely something that I'm going to want to see if I can do something about to keep that from coming out like that, because it's very, I mean, I doubt if I tried turning this on right now that it would even work, because I doubt there's enough of a connection being made there. And on this board, we have some pretty important chips. All right, our CIAs are over here. So if that board's not making good contact, this thing is not going to work. Let me spin this computer around here for a second. Okay, so now we've got it turned around. So this is the main motherboard. And a few interesting things here. This is the SID right here. Our main processor, the 6510, is down here. This is kind of interesting. This is actually the kernel ROM, but you can see there's like this label that's been added on top that's actually got some height to it. That's kind of interesting. But that says, let's see if we can get in here, 251104-04R. That's the kernel ROM, so that 04 is a revision 4, which is a late revision. Most of these only have 01 in them that I've seen. So that's going to be interesting when we get this thing turned on, because that looks like that's a later edition. And the other interesting thing here is, right here is our VIC chip. And you'll notice it is the only chip that has a heatsink. Okay, and as I mentioned a minute ago when we had the computer turned the other way, the power board is underneath here. This actually is the connector PCB, which is what all of the ports connect to. So the power board's back there. It's kind of hard to see right now. And this long one here is the drive board, and that controls the onboard 1541 drive. Now, there were rumors that there was going to be a dual drive version of the SX called the DX, single drive and dual drive. As far as I know, that never really went anywhere. But we know that they were thinking about it at some point, because if you look in the SX-64 user's guide, there is an illustration of the computer that clearly shows it with 2 disk drives. So at some point in its development, Commodore was at least considering the possibility of a dual drive version. It probably never happened simply because the SX didn't sell all that well. So they probably just never went ahead to develop the dual drive version. The floppy drive mechanism in here can be swapped out with that from a regular 1541. It's not that hard. The wiring is a little bit different. You've got to change some of that, but it can be done. All right. The hardware is absolutely identical to what's in a 1541. This little PCB here is for the cartridge port that's on top with this one. One other thing about the disk drives, and we'll talk more about this when I get to the video where I'm actually going to out and clean it. There were 2 different types of drive mechanisms. There's the Alps and the Neutronics, and every SX-64 has this particular version. And this is the Alps version. This was actually the earliest version of the 1541 drive. Let me take you over here real quick. This is the Neutronics version that has the lever. And it's pretty obvious why Commodore used the Alps drive here, because it protrudes out very, very little, unlike the Neutronics that has that big lever that sticks out. So because this is a little more flush, it makes it easier to put the keyboard on the front. Okay, enough talking. Let's actually plug this thing in and see what it does. I said a minute ago that I wasn't going to push the I/O board, so I was going to take it out again anyway. But yeah, probably would be a good idea. Let's go ahead and push that back in. Let's do a test so that we know what this thing's actually doing before I start taking it apart. Okay, so looking at this a little more closely here. This side is the male socket. All right, the side that's on the I/O board itself is the male side for these pins, and then this is a female socket that's over here on the main board. Over here, you can see the only thing that this is really attached to the case is there's a little black plastic peg that sticks through here. You can see where it comes out right here. And you can see there's a bit of a gap between the board and that metal clip there. And you can see it does seem to be kind of bent back like towards the speaker. And if you look at the bottom really closely, I don't know how well you can see this, there's a hole right down here where a second of those black pegs should have been. It seems that has broken off, and this whole board has kind of leaned out a bit, which is one reason that it's barely even touching the female connector right now. So what I'm going to probably have to do to get that back in is to pop this thing out, which will probably break it. But that's okay, actually, because it's just a little plastic thing. I can replace that easily enough if it does break, and I'm going to have to replace the one down below anyway, so not really a big deal. Okay. Let's see here if I can just stick my little pointer thing in here. I'm going to have to get something flat and kind of pry that out a little bit. Let's try this. This is handy. This is my chip lifter. And of course that fell down inside the computer, but that's okay. Okay, so I got that pushed back together. Let's see, it's not quite a perfectly tight fit, but good enough for now. For a test, it'll work. So, let's fire this up and see what happens. Okay, drive was spinning. Screen is slowly powering up, and yay, it looks like we're working. 38911 basic bytes free, which is exactly what we want to have. The drive spun, so that's good. Let's see about the keyboard here. Yeah. We're getting some response, but not what we ought to be getting here. Yeah, pretty intermittent. But that does, I think, is probably a keyboard problem. With the keyboard itself, you know, the membrane is probably needs to be replaced. But we won't know that for sure until I get in there. But that's not today's project. Okay. So now that we know that it generally works, let's just pop a disk in and see if the drive works. Okay, so the disk I have in the drive actually has, I think, well, a program on it that will play some tunes. That'll give us a test of the SID as well. Right now we just have to hope that we can get the keyboard working well enough to load it. Okay, so loaded the directory. It's good news for the drive working. Come on. Okay. This isn't the one I wanted. I'll try a different disk. Okay, this is the disk that has the right program on it. I'm going to come up here, load the directory. There we go. So will the SID actually work? Let's see. One of my favorite songs from the 80s. All right, well, that seemed to work. Let's try one more. If this doesn't take you back to the 80s, I don't know what will. It sounds to me like the SID is okay, but the speaker's kind of crap. Well, it's a good thing we're going to be changing the speaker. But at least we know that, on the whole, hey, this thing works. Apart from the keyboard. Alright, well, I think that's enough for one video. Next time, we'll actually start tearing into this thing a little bit more, doing some disassembly, some cleaning, putting some heat sinks on, and we're going to do that user port fix. So, see you next time.